I wondered if it was possible to get the standard Behringer 911 envelope generator to loop. So this is the result of a few initial experiments. So obviously we've got the envelope generator and it's got a positive going output and it's got a switch trigger, S-trigger input. So what I'm going to do with this, the red patch lead is going to be my output, and I'm going to take it to a multiples for the moment, and then from the multiples I'm going to use a pink lead and go to the frequency control input of a voltage controlled oscillator, and then I'm going to take another pink lead and take the auxiliary output and plug it into my output mixer. So if I turn it up, we've got a constant tone. It's there. So I'll just turn that down for the moment. So we've got the output of the envelope generator that's a positive going voltage. We need to convert that into a switch trigger. And oh look, there's the Behringer 961, which has two V-trigger in, or voltage in, to switch trigger out. So I'm going to swap to purple patch leads, and what I'm going to do is take the switch trigger input to the switch trigger output on the 961, and then what it says voltage trigger in, we're not connecting it to a voltage trigger but connecting it to the multiples, which is the output to the 961. I've connected into the A column on the 961 switch trigger converter. Now I'm going to turn up the VCO and it's not looping. Now the reason it's not looping is because it's got no output, it's got nothing to trigger that switch trigger, and so it doesn't get a switch trigger in. So we're static at the moment. We need to inject a switch trigger. Well, the simplest way of doing that, I found, is to actually just pull the switch trigger input jack, and it's now looping, because what we've done is momentarily shorted that switch trigger to ground as we inserted the jack. So short attack, long decay, long attack, short decay. So there we are, the envelope generator is looping. Now the one thing I found on this, because this is a very simple setup, a bit brute force, is I've got the E, the sustain control, set to minimum. If I set it off anything other than minimum, it just hangs. But if I move it back, it continues. And again, we can almost get into the audio. Well, there we are, we've gone into the audio. Okay, so just turn it up so it's slow. Now we can actually hear what's going on. How do we stop it? Well, basically we've got to break the circular circuit, remove the output jack, and it stops. Now you could put an attenuator in there or a switch, and to restart it again, reinserts the switch trigger in jack. And as I say, what's happening there is when we insert it, we're getting a momentary short to ground, and that's what's causing it to start off. Now let's try and be a little bit more elegant with this. So what I'm going to do is, rather than taking the switch trigger output directly from the 961 directly to the envelope generator, I'm going to take it to another multiple. So what we've got now is exactly what we had before, but down here we've gone from the switch trigger out of the 961 to a multiple, and then from the multiple to the switch trigger in. So we haven't actually made any difference at the moment. It will just work identically. Pull the jack and it stops. But what reason I've plugged it into a multiple is I'm then going to plug another lead in, green patch lead, into that what is now the multiple for the switch triggers. And you'll note as I plugged it in, just the action of plugging it in gave it a momentary short to ground, and we've started again. So I've disconnected the output, because the good thing about switch triggers is they are wired OR. You can connect as many of them together, you don't need a mixer, and they will just basically OR themselves. So I'm just looking for something metal. So here is the end of the patch lead that's now going into the switch trigger. It's going nowhere, but all I have to do, oh, handy metal ruler, is short the end together, and off we go. Got to pull it out again to stop it. Again, just simply short the end together, off we go. Now ideally what you need there is just a big button that connects tip to screen, switch trigger to ground, and off we go. So one more thing on this, we're using the 961. Well, can we cut it out the equation? The answer is yes, we can. So what I'm going to do is remove the cable that's going from the 961 to my switch trigger multiple. I'm going to remove the input cable that's going from, in essence, my envelope generator out multiple. And what I've got here is a V-TRIG to S-trigger lead. Made them up myself. They're a bit fiddly, but you can get stuff in. There's not a lot of room in an 1/8 inch jack connector, but the key point is all of the components don't have to be in one end. You can have some components in one end and some in the other, and I've made these bright orange with a red tip so that I don't mix them up with anything else. So I take my switch end, which is red, and I connect it into my switch trigger side of things, and I take my other end, which is the voltage input, and I connect it to the voltage output. And again, as before, absolutely nothing happens until I take my flying patch lead, grab my handy lump of metal, and short the end together. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work because I've not got the output plugged in correctly. So let's try again. Off we go. We're now oscillating. But again, to stop it, I need to disconnect the output. Plug in the output, nothing happens, short the switch trigger, and off we go. So there are a couple of ways to get the envelope generator, Behringer 911 envelope generator, looping. Okay, it's only looping on attack and decay, but it's doing it with no extra components, just the standard envelope generator and the 961. Thank you.